Today I'm diving into the shocking case of Trenny Lyn Gibson. Make sure to hit subscribe and smash that like button if you want more true crime content. October 8th, 1976, started as just another rainy fall day in Knoxville, Tennessee. Despite the weather, Bearden High School's gardening club, including 16-year-old Trenny, had a field trip planned to the Great Smoky Mountains. The exact route was kept secret until the last minute due to weather conditions. Trenny was your typical small-town teenager with big dreams. She loved everything about plants and planned to study landscape design in college. She was also a talented artist who worked at a local cafe after school, saving money for her future. At home, she helped her mom Hope with cooking and looked after her little brother. Trenny had two brothers, older brother Bob, who was her best friend, and younger brother Miracle, plus a sister named Tina. Classmates described Trenny as quiet and independent. Not the popular crowd, but not an outcast either. She kept to herself mostly. The Gibson family were devout Baptists, conservative but loving. Friends who visited described their home as warm and welcoming. But that October morning would change everything forever. Given her religious upbringing, you might assume strict parenting. But honestly, the only rebellious thing about Trenny was occasional smoking. And even then, she'd only take a drag when friends offered her a cigarette. Pretty tame stuff. No other major rule breaking that anyone knew about. But let's get back to what happened that day. That morning, Trenny's mom, Hope, dropped her off at the school meetup point. As they pulled up, Trenny asked a passing classmate if the trip was still happening since it was starting to drizzle. He confirmed they were good to go. Trenny grabbed her lunch from the car but left her purse and textbooks behind. She'd only need the basics for a day hike. The day before, she'd actually asked her mom to come along, but Hope couldn't find a babysitter for her youngest son. After saying goodbye, Trenny joined her classmates boarding the bus to the Smokies. She walked to the back and sat next to Robert Simpson, a friend of her brother's, who was a bit older. Bob had specifically asked Robert to keep an eye on his sister since this was Trenny's first real hiking trip away from family. Once everyone was seated, teacher Wayne Dunlap announced their route. They'd hike up Andrews Bald Trail, then return the same way. They could observe different plants along the way, but absolutely no wandering off the trail or collecting samples. Good thing, too. Stepping off that tourist trail meant entering some seriously dangerous terrain. We're talking massive boulders, deep crevices, and sheer cliff faces everywhere. But the trail itself was considered completely safe, no obstacles, and even if you did wander off, the terrain would stop you from going far. After the briefing, the hike began. The students walked in small groups, one behind the other. Only one adult supervised the entire trip, their teacher, who stayed at the back to make sure no one got left behind. By today's standards, that setup sounds insane. One teacher supervising 40 teenagers in the wilderness. But back in the 70s, nobody batted an eye at those ratios. Same goes for the mystery route. These days, parents get detailed itineraries and have to sign permission slips for every field trip. But in 1976, kids often found out where they were going once they were already on the bus. Different times, looser rules. As they hiked up the trail, kids were being kids, talking loud, cracking jokes, pointing out cool plants they spotted. The Smokies were gorgeous, even with the miserable weather. Cold rain and wind made it pretty uncomfortable. During their lunch break, Robert noticed Trenny was underdressed, just jeans, a blouse, and a sweater. He gave her his jacket to stay warm. After lunch, Robert and Trenny reached the end of the trail at Andrew's Bald Summit and started heading back down together. That's Robert's version of events, according to his official police statement. On the way up, Trenny and I stopped to chat. She seemed in good spirits. When we reached the eating area near Andrew's Bald, we sat down for lunch. She didn't seem like she wanted to run off or anything. She even shared part of her sandwich with me. When I decided to keep going, I asked if she wanted to join me, and she said yes. We walked about a mile, then took a 5-minute break because she was breathing pretty heavily. When we finally reached the summit around 1:30 p.m., she was still in a good mood. We looked around. Then it started raining, so we took shelter under a tree. When the rest of the group caught up, Trenny seemed energized and ready to head back down. She asked if I was coming with them, but I wanted to stay at the summit a little longer. She said goodbye. That was the last time I saw her. When I got back to the bus, I noticed she wasn't there. Other kids noticed too. I asked the group she'd been with, and they said they'd stopped to rest while she kept walking. Last they saw her, the trail split left, but Trenny went right. Here's where the story gets complicated. According to some accounts, during that lunch break, Robert confessed he had romantic feelings for Trenny. She reportedly didn't feel the same way. To her, he was just a friend. After that awkward conversation, they turned around and started heading back down the mountain. When the rain started, everyone took shelter under trees. Important detail: Robert and Trenny weren't hiking alone. Other student groups were ahead and behind them. This is where witness accounts start getting fuzzy. Robert apparently started descending with a different group, then stopped and decided to hang back. His reason? He wanted to track a bear. That's what he later told police and Trenny's family. Either way, Robert ended up far from the main student groups, and nobody saw him during this time. Meanwhile, Trenny was descending with other classmates. At some point, they stopped to rest, but she kept going alone. Witnesses said she was walking unusually fast, like she was in a hurry or had somewhere specific to go. Her classmates watched her for a while. One student later reported seeing Trenny suddenly stop, turn her head to the right like she'd spotted something, crouch down briefly, then quickly step off the trail into thick forest. The witness looked away for just a second to talk to friends. When she looked back, Trenny was gone. Her classmates started calling her name, scanning the dense woods where she'd disappeared. Most figured she'd taken a different trail and would meet them at the bus. But when everyone gathered at the parking lot, no Trenny. Robert showed up dirty and out of breath, acting surprised and irritated that she hadn't returned. He claimed he'd last seen her on the summit before going off to track that bear. Here's the thing. Nobody had seen Robert on the way down either. Teacher Wayne Dunlap immediately organized a search with several students, but found nothing. He sent the bus back to school and called park rangers for help. The official search began 30 minutes after Trenny failed to return. With heavy clouds and fog limiting visibility in those dense woods, finding anyone seemed nearly impossible. But there was no time to waste. Soon, Trenny's family was notified, and massive search operations began, both ground crews and helicopters. Searchers made some immediate discoveries. Right where Trenny had stepped off the trail, they found several beer cans and cigarette butts, but it wasn't clear if they were connected to her disappearance. Strangely, there's no record of whether these potential clues were ever properly investigated. The search conditions were brutal. Temperatures dropped to 30 degrees Fahrenheit by evening, with freezing rain making the rocky trail dangerously slippery. One rescue worker actually fell and broke several ribs. They brought in search dogs, multiple breeds with different handlers. And here's the weird part. Every single dog behaved exactly the same way. As soon as they picked up Trenny's scent, every dog led searchers to the nearest scenic overlook. Then they all headed toward the road and stopped dead in their tracks. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Trenny's family tried everything. Hired private detectives, arranged for helicopter pilots and rescue teams, but park administration blocked them all, claiming too many searches would cause irreparable harm to nature. Imagine how her family felt being told that protecting plants was more important than finding their daughter. Winter came and went. New searches resumed in April 1977. They still didn't find Trenny, but they discovered her personal belongings in very suspicious places. Trenny always carried a special comb for long hair, a gift from her mother. Her sister Tina had an identical one. That comb turned up in Robert's car. Trenny's brother Bob found it there, and Robert was actually using it. When Bob examined it, he found Robert's hair caught between the teeth. Robert claimed Trenny had given him the comb for safekeeping during their hike. Nobody could confirm this story. Why didn't Robert mention having Trenny's comb immediately after she disappeared? Then there were her sapphire jewelry pieces, a star pendant and ring she'd been wearing the day she vanished. They turned up with some girl from a completely different class. This girl refused to explain how she got them. Even worse, she refused to return them to Trenny's family. The evidence was piling up, but none of it was leading to answers. These were Christmas and birthday gifts. Robert had an explanation for this, too. He claimed Trenny had given her jewelry to another girl to hold while she went to the bathroom. But the jewelry turned up with a completely different girl from another class. Strange, right? It's starting to look like someone from that hiking trip knew exactly what happened to Trenny Gibson. How else do you explain her personal belongings scattered among different students, none of whom could give a straight answer about how they got them? They also found a hand-drawn map that Trenny had made. It turned up with another student who wasn't even on the field trip that day. For some reason, he was immediately ruled out as a suspect. Were students at Bearden High covering something up? After a year with zero progress, her sister Tina started interviewing classmates herself. What she heard was terrifying. Students told her to mind her own business, or what happened to Trenny might happen to her too. These weren't just brush-offs. They were direct threats. Years later, one unnamed student casually mentioned that Trenny died within 30 minutes of disappearing. She said it dismissively like it was common knowledge. Another student even named a possible burial site, Mellinger Ridge.
Now we get to some intriguing theories about what really happened. Remember those cigarette butts and beer can found where Trenny disappeared? Turns out none of the students had brought beer on the trip. The can looked relatively fresh, not like it had been there long. The search dogs that tracked Trenny's scent also found more cigarette butts of the same brand near the road where her trail went cold. This leads to the abduction theory. Someone kidnapped Trenny, hid her near the scenic overlook in some kind of underground bunker, then brought her to the road and drove off after the other students had left. The gate to the overlook was open that day, so someone had definitely been there. With the heavy cloud cover and fog, spiriting someone away unnoticed would have been entirely possible. So who could have done this? There are several unofficial suspects. First suspect, In October 1975, a disturbing incident occurred. A student from Trenny's school named Calvin Bowman, one of the few black students, broke into the Gibson home looking for Trenny. Calvin lived about 2 miles away, had 7 siblings, and was known as the class clown. He'd actually been friends with Trenny before this incident, and Trenny was close with his sister Annette. That night, Calvin was drunk and yelling for Trenny's brother Bob. When Trenny's mother saw an intruder in their house, she grabbed a shotgun and shot Calvin in the leg. Even wounded, he attacked Trenny, grabbing her and trying to drag her outside while making explicit threats about what he planned to do. Fortunately, they managed to subdue him, and he was sent to juvenile detention. Calvin was furious that his assault had failed and promised the Gibson family would pay for this. After serving his time, Calvin returned to school and began seriously bullying Trenny. She was terrified of him and made sure never to be alone with him. Some students claimed they saw Bowman's car following their bus that day. Problem: Calvin didn't own a car, but some still insist they saw Calvin in a vehicle behind the bus, just not his own car. This gets murky because Calvin had an alibi. He was supposedly at school that day, confirmed by a teacher who also said no cars were following the bus. Here's where Calvin's alibi falls apart. Former students revealed that Bearden High's attendance system was basically worthless. If you showed up in the morning, you were marked present for the entire day. Students could easily leave campus unnoticed. So Calvin could have been at school in the morning, then driven to the Smokies to intercept the hiking group. The timing would have worked. But there are problems with the Calvin theory. If multiple witnesses saw a car following the bus, why did the teacher deny it? And how would Calvin know the exact hiking route when even the students didn't know until they were on the bus? The case against Calvin is built on motive and opportunity, but the physical evidence is thin, and he's not the only suspect. The second suspect was Robert. Beyond the suspicious bear tracking story, arriving breathless at the bus, and keeping Trenny's comb, his behavior during the search was bizarre. While search teams were desperately looking for Trenny, Robert showed up at the Gibson house, making strange comments to her sister. He claimed that if Calvin had kidnapped Trenny, he'd kill her. Later, he said Trenny had probably run off with some dirty hitchhiker. Even weirder, Robert appointed himself the family's spokesperson. He'd come to their house, answer calls from journalists and police, and give statements on behalf of the family. The Gibsons repeatedly asked him to stop. Why was he so invested in controlling the narrative? Here's a crucial detail. Robert's father was the district attorney in Knoxville. Having a powerful DA for a dad would be incredibly helpful if you found yourself under suspicion for murder. His father could coach him on how to answer questions, what to say during interrogations, which Robert managed to avoid after that initial statement. With that kind of legal expertise in the family, staying ahead of an investigation would be much easier. Without physical evidence or witnesses, even strong suspicions weren't enough to build a case. There's also a conspiracy theory that Robert and Calvin worked together. They weren't close friends, but they knew each other. Calvin had connections to Trenny's brother Bob. The Gibson family believes this theory. One person lured Trenny away while the other attacked. Even if Robert didn't directly participate, he definitely knows more than he's saying. The theory goes like this. Calvin wanted revenge for the home invasion incident. He promised Robert that if they caught Trenny together, Robert could have his way with her after Calvin got his payback. If Robert had romantic feelings that Trenny rejected, maybe he thought this sounded like a good deal. 2 people could more easily abduct and dispose of someone than one acting alone. Plus, Trenny trusted Robert. He was her brother's best friend. She would never have seen it coming. Laura Rist supports this conspiracy theory as well. She's dedicated 17 years to investigating Trenny's case, compiling every piece of evidence into one comprehensive file. She's kept this case alive through her blog, fighting for justice for Trenny. The most likely scenario is that someone Trenny knew well called to her from the bushes. Someone she trusted enough to approach without suspicion. That person grabbed her, dragged her deeper into the forest, then transported her away by car. The wilderness setting makes this case seem like a nature gone wrong story, but the forest was probably just an unlucky witness to something much more sinister. After nearly 50 years, Trenny Lyn Gibson remains missing. Her family still doesn't have answers. The students who were there that day, many of whom acted suspiciously or made threats, have never faced serious investigation. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe and like if you are interested in this topic.